Caesar, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to work with you today, man. For people who maybe aren't familiar with you and all the incredible stuff you're doing in the coaching, especially around swim and dive now, from my understanding, and how relentless you are, literally all hours of the day. Every time I open Instagram, it's like, man, this guy is just freaking relentless. Would you mind filling me in a little bit about who you are and all the amazing things you got going on there, man?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, brother. My name's Caesar. I'm the head swimming and diving coach at St. Thomas University in Miami, Florida. I also have my CSCS, and I kind of work in the strength space with Olympic sports athletes, primarily just swimming is my main sport. And I'm entering my sixth full year at the helm of this program this fall. And it's been a relentless journey to keep with the theme. And I think I would start off my relentless theme is the definition, right? Oppressively constant. And I think in athletics, I think you and I could both agree is it's all about the grind, right? It's we got to work, 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 work. We talk about sets and reps and periodization and all these other things, but I think one thing that is kind of lacking in the coaching industry, especially at the college ranks, is intention, right? Is consistency. Sure, relentless synonyms, consistency is one of them, but intention throughout the grind, right? Engagement throughout the grind, right? If I'm doing, a strength block, I'm doing a 5x5 on back squats, right? We could sit down and talk about bar speed. We could talk about, different stances and everything else in regards to that. But where is your engagement and where is your relentless focus on in terms of actually doing the work? And what I mean by that is a lot of CNS stuff like mind muscle connection, right? Like just doing some proprioception work, working on their body awareness, but more along the lines of just circling back on that intention. Because you and I both know there's reps that you go full blown in. That this generation calls it what, locking in, where you lock in on a rep versus those reps in the middle, right? That you kind of lose a little bit of focus on. How relentless can you be throughout that set, right? And that's kind of my MO for this past season is we all work hard. Everybody's a hard worker, but where is the intention and engagement throughout that process? And I guess that's how I kind of frame the relentless mindset this year.
Makes me think of this concept. There was a quote I had heard maybe a decade or more ago about the concept of having a purpose for every action, so every action has a result. And when you really stop and think about it and dissect it for a second, not to get too philosophical, but it's like, why do we do things that don't have a purpose? Right? Like, if we're a strength coach, if we're a coach of a program or whatever it is that way, why am I gonna add something if it provides no value? It just makes absolutely no sense. And to your point about the definition of relentless and what it truly means to be relentless, I think part of developing a relentless culture of athletes and a team that way is having their full trust that you are going to do and implement the things that are going to help them with their main goal, which in your case is, I'm assuming, being a better swimmer, being faster in the pool, being, more in shape so you can swim a really long distance or whatever it is that way. It's like everything ties back to the goals or enhancing those goals. We don't add stuff just to add stuff. We don't add fluff. I think when you have that trust and connection with your athletes, that concept of being relentless is significantly easier because they know and you know that every single thing you do ties back to what they're there for in the first place. It's not so much just doing things to stay busy or doing things to pass time. It's doing stuff because it actually provides something valuable.
And I think that's where sports science and really just athletics in general is trying to trend towards, right, brother? It's eliminating that. It's becoming as efficient as possible, right? Relentless efficiency. How can we get more for less, right? We're dialing in, obviously, in your space, it's all about obviously preventing injuries, rehab, and performance, right? And the way you do that is through relentless intention, relentless engagement in everything that you do. Everybody's familiar with working hard. I'm going to go back to it. Everybody knows hard work works eventually. It may not happen in this practice, next week, next season, but at some point when you're consistent, and that's what I tell all my athletes. You want to be successful at anything in life. In my opinion, it's not, we talk about discipline, we talk about motivation. I think the biggest thing is consistency, right? When you're doing your podcast series, brother, right? It started off on one journey, and then the more consistently you did them, the better you got to where now your platform is where it's at. It's going to continue to evolve because of your relentless consistency with podcasts and interviewing people and networking, right? It's why I'm even on this call right now. We met at a NSCA convention like 3 years ago, right? Working and that's just why we're here because of your relentless networking. So my message is simple when I coach is it's actually not even to build better summers, it's to build better humans. Right. And that's kind of my tagline. That's my catchphrase. It's kind of that's what I center my philosophy around. And one of those cornerstones, as you know, is being consistent, being relentless.
Building off of that, you mentioned about building better humans, and this comes up so often when I'm talking with people. I don't care if it's athlete, strength coach, AT, head coach, whatever title you give someone, that concept of, hey, we are here for sport, but you are going to become a better person from it is coming up all the time for good reason. And there's been some debate about if sport teaches you the lesson or if it's actually the people, the captains, the coaches, or, the metaphorical mud that you all walk through together, so to speak, right? Where does the lesson actually come from? But to me, hearing you talk, I don't think it matters where the lessons come from. I think it just matters that you get the lesson, right? I don't think it matters if it comes from your teammate or your coach or whoever. I think ultimately, if you put the time in and you get something out of it that makes you a better person that you can go turn around and help the next person with, the box is checked. We're all good. We don't need to know or fight over these little, I call them like sand in the jar instead of rocks in the jar, right? Metaphorically, if I've got a jar, if I put the rocks in and then the sand, everything fits. If I put the sand in the rocks, you won't fit everything, right? Like, I think sometimes we pick the weirdest hills to die on and we fight over where the lessons come from when in reality, if you're in relentless pursuit of greatness in everything that you do, you're going to get the lesson regardless of where it came from.
Correct. And I think just where I would go with that is very simple. Relentless is a great word. It's a word that just jumps out at you, right? It's a powerful word. A lot of great coaches throughout the years have used it, right? You think of Mamba mentality, the relentless pursuit of the best version of yourself, and all these other great things. And I think every year, relentless was my word for this year, right? And I center every season around a singular word and theme to keep it simple, but also to make sure that those rocks that you address in that jar, make sure that they're solid, right? Every coach will tell you the foundations, right? We talk about discipline, consistency, showing up, being the hardest worker in the room. And that's all great. We could talk about it. But in my opinion, your culture is not set on what you talk about, it's what you're about. It's who you are. It's like what you said. The lesson doesn't come just from the coaches, the athletes. It comes from anybody and everybody. And that should be the end goal of every single coach, whether you're a strength coach, whether you're a physical therapist, wherever you're at in that person's journey. Can you sit back and say that you can become self autonomous, right? Take your hands off the wheel and build that culture where it does the work on its own. I think that is the overall goal for me. And I'm very happy to say in the 6 years I've been here at St. Thomas, that's one of the biggest things that I'm proud of. It's not winning a national championship. It's not the 24 national champions and not to belittle all of the athletic accomplishments of our program, but it's being able to say that when I'm not in the room, everybody's relentless, right? And that is the whole goal of every coach, in my opinion, is to render yourself obsolete, right? I think that's the goal. And that's something that I've worked towards for again 6 years now. And I'm very proud to say that we're almost there. We're almost
Uh,
there.
We've used this a lot in relation to theory and definition that way. What does this relentlessness look like in relation to your team in action, right? Whether you're there or not there, is that, 4 a.m. wake ups and just grinding out every single second of the day? Or are there times when maybe things don't go according to plan and we have to kind of go off course a little bit? Like, what does that actually look like applied to the day-to-day life of a college athlete, if you will?
I think for us, it starts with resilience, right? We talk about building capacity to train. We talk about building endurance, suffering well, right? So for me, a day in the life looks like, okay, hey, we know that we're not going to be dialed in our generation's terms. They like to use the word locked in. We're not going to be locked in all 24 hours of a day. But being relentless is knowing, okay, when it's time to get into work, when it's time to be fully engaged. I say this a lot, be where your feet are, right? It's not about the sets and reps at the end of the day. You can, like we talked about, man, we could do anything 4x8, 5x12, 5x20. It doesn't matter. If you're engaged, right, and you're relentless and you're consistent, you're going to get better. And our program here is very tough. You're looking at 8 to 9 swim practices a week, right? You're looking at 3 early morning sessions. Our pool heater broke at our facility this year, talking about challenge and adversity, right? So we had to wake up at 4 a.m. 3 weeks before the national championship with our national roster. They're waking up at 4 a.m., driving 45 minutes to a pool and coming back for classes as a college student athlete, right? And being able to work that problem, right? It was something that is relentless in itself. And I think the word kind of evolved and became the culture this year. And for all the coaches that may be listening to this, keep it simple and stupid, right? That KISS principle, right? Again, one word every single season that I focus on, and I build everything around that. And this year was probably my most successful, Dan. Obviously, that's why we're on this podcast, is that we were relentless from when we woke up. That doesn't mean that we were working hard and locked in every single moment. But when it came down to it, when it was time to work, we got our work in, and our results speak for themselves.
And as you mentioned, sometimes things don't go how you planned them, right? Pool heater breaking. On the bright side, at least you're in Miami, Florida. My
That's
God,
true.
up where I'm from in northeastern PA, where they get, a couple feet of snow every winter, like,
Yep.
you ain't getting in that pool, period, right?
Yep.
But things don't always go according to plan. In fact, I forget if it's Murphy's Law or what law it is, but basically, there's a law out there that suggests any plan that you have is never going to actually occur. So it's like, do you sit there and you come up with all these other contingency plans, or do you learn how to figure it out as you go? Or, where do we go when things hit the fan? Ultimately, to quote Ryan Holiday's line, I think that obstacle that gets thrown in your path becomes your way forward, right? In this case, it's like, well, pool heater broke. We've got to go to a different pool. It's cold. We've got to get the swimming in because nationals is coming. Well, screw it. We're going to drive 45 minutes. We're going to wake up at 4 a.m. And it's funny because Miami, 45 minutes, you might have gone all of 3 miles in that time.
Correct.
But
Correct.
you got to do what you got to do. But it's so easy when you're in the moment and not seeing the big picture to get caught up in the headache and the frustration that comes with things not going according to plan. Because when things are not going according to plan for you, it's going to appear like it's going to according to plan for everyone else. Even if it's not for them, it will appear like that. And I think that, to me, is one of the most trying and frustrating times that can make or break the success of an athletics program that way is when everything hits the fan, how do you respond? How do you rally? And how do you keep your composure in those moments as opposed to kind of letting the circumstances dictate your outcome?
And I think, again, going back to Relentless, right? This is our Relentless podcast, framing our culture around that this year. We took it in stride, Dan. I mean, we really didn't even lose a step. It was like, okay, hey, obviously behind the scenes, we were scrambling. Shout out to my amazing coaching staff. They worked the problem to help me find potential solutions and locations, but we didn't even spend thought, right? And one of the biggest areas of professional development that I'm going to do this summer is really just into performance psychology, right? Because with this younger generation, kind of tying back to going through adversity, right? They have had the short end of the stick forever, right? Like take the incoming fresh right now, born in 2008, 2009. They were like in fifth or sixth grade when COVID happened, right? And then AI emerged in their high school years. So not only do they not have the opportunity to have social interaction, but now they're rapidly losing, Dan. I'm sure you're going to see this, the ability to think. I tell my athletes all the time, relentless focus. Why? Because you're on Instagram and TikTok, and I know it's not called TikTok, but you're on the social media, right? You're on your phones on 10-second reels. So you're losing the ability to focus, and then circling all the way back to that relentless intention, that relentless engagement being where your feet are, you're losing that ability to think. We just had our seniors last week at the awards banquet. Every single one of them said time moved what? Fast. And why is that, Dan? Because you're not living in the moment. You're not being engaged. So when you're going through all these adversities and all these different challenges that come with any sport, at any industry, in any coaching role, you're going to go through problems and adversity. Do you let your situation dictate how you think? Or are you relentless in the moment? You figure out, hey, instead of, man, this sucks. Okay, hey, how can we have a work the problem mindset? Right? What are our potential solutions? What are our actionables that we can attack and execute? Um, so again, it's a very scary new age of coaching, and I know a lot of new sciences out there, not a lot of new approaches are out there, and I'm sure Dan that we could talk a little bit about that and maybe what you're seeing on your end versus what I'm seeing on mine.
To your point, this comes up in a lot of conversations how athletes are losing their ability to independently solve problems
Correct.
and independently solve problems quickly. And ultimately, that's the hallmark of a good athlete. I don't care what sport we're talking about. You can
Yes.
talk swimming, you can talk bull riding, you can talk racing, you could talk lacrosse or football, or literally throw any sport at me
Yes.
and show me the best athletes in that sport. When things hit the fan, they find a way to figure it out. When their team needs a goal, or they need a touchdown, or they need a hit, they deliver, right? There is a problem, they solve the problem, and they do it in a way that you might never expect, right? Earlier today on a different podcast, I referenced Patrick Mahomes and how he's literally had throws that he completes with his left hand. And it's like, wait a second, he's a right-handed throwing, right-handed dominant athlete. How come he's switching to the other hand and throwing the ball? Well, guess what? It worked. The pass was completed. They got what they needed. He's just willing to go to a length that very few others are willing to solve the problem at hand. So I completely agree. I think that the ability to solve complex problems is huge. But I think a lot of times in relation to problems, to go back to your term of relentless, first off, you have to relentlessly pound away at the problem, right? If you need a goal, you better put forth all your efforts into getting that goal. If you need a swimmer to hit a certain time or come in a certain position before the meet is over, you better put forth everything you've got into that. And I mean everything. If you need that goal, it's not so much kill time, it's not so much pass the ball around, it's hey, this is what we need it now. In swimming, it's a little different because may only be one person in the pool at the time, but guess what? Everyone else better be rallied around and better be freaking rowdy pushing them forward, right? Like the mental energy enters the picture. So I think first off, you have to be relentless to crush the problem. But second off, a lot of times I think we mix up our problem psychology and think the problem is tied to a person. Well, we're in this situation because this person did this or this person didn't do this. And problems cause additional problems, and it becomes this problem cascade, for lack of a better way to put it, because we don't recognize the problem is external instead of internal. We think when something goes wrong, it's got to be blamed on someone else or it's got to be due to someone else's actions or lack thereof. When in reality, there's always gonna be people who do things or don't do things that you didn't expect. So what are you, as an individual, going to do about it? And how can you, as a team, rally together as one and fight the problem collectively instead of literally adding fuel to the, problem fire that's burning, right? So,
Right.
I think that was a complicated explanation that probably used the word problem 5 million times. But ultimately, if you treat the problems as problems and not other people are the problem, and you hammer away at them with intense focus and energy and commitment, you're going to be okay, regardless of what the issue is.
And to take the abstract and put it concrete, you asked earlier, what does a relentless day look like for us? Daily mobility every single day. Get on a foam roller, right? Take 5 to 10 minutes, right? Do that. Do a little bit of myofascial release, whatever that is, right? Do ab workouts, right? And swimming core is very important. In every single sport, core is important. Why not start off? Do 3 sets of 20 abs every single day. Be relentless in that. And relentless is it's a again it's a great word. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the way that I framed it here is how consistent can you be? Whether it's facing problems, whether it's taking extreme ownership, right? Which is everything is your fault, even when it's not, right? That's another cornerstone of my culture here, right? Swimming is an individual space. It's individual sport. It's based off of your performance, right? And it's one of the most unforgiving sports out there. It's a direct reflection. It's a direct representation of the work that you put in. right? Which is why I think the relentless tag has kind of it's caught on fire, right? It's not just everybody around me and my social media following has loved it because every single post you're going to see is relentless, and you already know it, right? Because I've oppressively been constantly posting that, right? So I live it, and that's another thing for coaches too, right? Live what you preach. We could talk for years about that, but yeah, yeah, definitely.
We've talked at length about being relentless in relation to sport. And I think a lot of athletes will admit that that tends to come somewhat natural to them, right?
Yeah.
They're usually, not always, but usually in college for a sport because they enjoy the sport. They like it, and there's something that it offers them that they cannot get elsewhere. But as you mentioned, we're in the business of building better people, not just better athletes. How do we encourage them to bring that same relentless energy to maybe other avenues that maybe don't offer the same appeal or the same timeline of gratification, if you will, as sport might, right? Like, it's really difficult to study 2 to 3 hours a day for week after week after week for an exam. It's really difficult to put the time in and write your essay by yourself because AI could generate it in 2 seconds. Why am I doing this? Because I'll never need to do it. And you can come up with any and every excuse in the world of trying to avoid the work, when in reality, we know that at least sport is trying to teach us the work is unavoidable. Yet for some areas of our life, it seems like that just doesn't stick the same.
Correct. And with the emergence of AI, I just circle back to this more and more. How you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And taking that principle, taking that mantra, however you want to frame it, and making that part of your identity. Yeah, you're right. AI can generate this essay for you, but is that who you are as an athlete? Because if you're going to cut short in life, how do you think you're going to cut? How do you think you're going to perform in athletics, right? You can skip reps, right? Everybody at some point has athletes in their program that may not do the rep to the intensity or to the load or to the duration that you want, right? And then that kind of trickles over. One of my national champions this year, we had a funny saying, make your bed. I told her as a freshman, make your bed, right? I think it was the one of the highest ranking admirals. His name escapes me right now, but he did that UT commencement speech. God, this is going to kill me. I've read like all of his books, but he started with make your bed, right? Because no matter if you had a bad day, a great day, the worst day of your life, the best day of your life, you come home to a freshly made bed, your day is going to be a little bit better, right? And going back to, again, how to translate this to your real life, if anything, in my opinion, like we already mentioned, for you, it comes down to what you are prideful about, what your process is going to be, how relentless you are in your process. At the end of the day, Dan, we all know where we fall short. Every human being on the planet knows they fall short. For me, it's rotational power, right? And it's Bulgarian split squats. And from a physical standpoint, right? I could eat a little bit cleaner nutritionally, right? Everybody probably could say that. Every athlete I've ever coached could probably do a little bit better with nutrition and hydration. So it's about how brutally honest are you going to be in your life? How relentlessly honest are you going to be in your life? And how are you going to address that? Right? Because it's very easy, especially with AI in this modern age, right, Dan? Everything is convenient, everything is efficient, everything is done for you. No thought required, right? I mean, you go on Google right now, you search anything, AI answers are the first ones to come up. And then people tell me, well, coach, I did my research. No, you didn't. You did a 5-second Google search. That's not research, right? Do you even know what MLA format or what APA or citations are anymore, right? And it's coming back to the younger generation and how to coach them. I think they've really been attracted to the relentless tag because it's easy to understand. And then I've slowly taught them how to be relentless, not just in the swimming pool, not just in the weight room, but in life, in their relationships. Because at some point, Dan, we all know this, you're going to be hit with a reality check, right? And with all this technology, you're kind of shielded from that as a younger athlete. But at some point, you're going to fall flat on your face. You're going to have to pick yourself up and dust yourself off. So be relentless in that.
Coming back to the AI, because maybe it's just because I grew up in a generation that didn't have access to AI with all of these different things, right? This is very new, uncharted territory. But to your point, there are people that I know that use it for every aspect of their life.
It's crazy.
It's literally like outsourcing everything. And I mean, I use it to generate funny pictures. We generate a lot of funny pictures with it, but that's a skill that I'm okay going my life without learning. If I never learn how to Photoshop and all that sort of thing, I'm okay with that. But I think to your point, you have to have this understanding of yourself as a person. And I also think as an athlete, especially in today's day and age, you have to understand what your brand appeal is, right? Everyone talks about this personal brand. Well, if you're an athlete, what is your personal brand? What does that stand for? What do you stand for? When people hear your name, what do they think of?
Right.
And if they just think of AI or the person that literally is just a product of AI, they're not gonna think the same, and you're not gonna have the same impact and influence as you might if you're true to yourself. And I say those terms impact and influence because, in my opinion, that's what all of this is about, right? You mentioned relentless energy. We build better people. We get some phenomenal outcomes from a sport. What impact do we have because of that?
Right.
What influence does that have for that, quote unquote, greater good, if you will? Does that inspire the next generation of swimmers to do something with the sport? Does that inspire someone to do something where, I don't know, maybe money is donated to charity or something? I'm just making stuff up at this point, but it's like, what did my actions for this specific thing, whatever it is, do that pushed us collectively towards something better? But I think as we've been talking, it all starts from just being relentless in your daily pursuits amongst everything, whether someone's looking, whether someone's not looking, whether it's, how you search things online or how you, cook versus go out and eat food. Like, don't get me wrong, I can crush a Five Guys burger and a milkshake, but that is done maybe once or twice a year. It's not something we're doing every day, right? Like we got to have boundaries, I guess you could say with this.
And I mean, just to sum it up, being relentless to me is not only being oppressively constant, it's being brutally honest with myself, understanding what my goals are and the process and the work needed to get there. Right. And one of the most powerful quotes that I've listened to recently, I think it's from Inky Johnson. Can I be relentless in my process without being emotionally attached to the results? Right. And I think a lot of athletes, especially younger athletes, are very what? They're very prize oriented. They're very results oriented. They want that end goal. They want that home run in the ninth inning, full count, for the World Series. They want that end result. So they're going to work in the process. They're going to be relentless for that result. And I guess the overarching mission here is not only to build better humans with me, but to be so relentless in your process that you're not emotionally attached to the results. Because as you and I both know, Dan, you are going to fail. You're going to fail big, right? I've won one national championship here in 6 years. I'm 1 for 12 for championships for conference and nationals. 1 for 12. That's less than 10%, right? But being relentless never changes because it's not about the championships for me. It's not about how many trophies or anything else. It's about how my impact and influence, to your point, is. How many lives can I say I've directly impacted and changed through my relentless approach to how I coach and how I am as a man?
And building off that emotional component for a second, going back to what we talked about before in relation to problem solving, emotions can be the biggest factor helping or hindering your performance in an athletic event. I've been at events where emotions are very high in the best way possible, and everyone is just everything clicks. The energy is off the charts, and everyone is just pumping on all cylinders. I've also been at athletic events where emotions are very low in a not as good sense, right? Maybe you get some of those brawls and fights that show up on the Barstool Sports occurring. Maybe you see breakdowns and meltdowns. That could be after the event, that could be before the event, but emotion is human. We're all gonna feel it. We're all gonna have to, address those feelings at some point. How do you help your team develop a healthy relation with their emotions? Because I think it's important to not just go the whole season suppressing them and not feeling anything, right? But by the same token, there's times when it's maybe not the best to put that emotion on display, and acting an emotion actually leads to more negative outcomes.
Funny you bring that up. We lost our conference championship on the men's side by 20 points, which in swimming is nothing, right? That's a couple positions a difference between us and the champions. And the men's team were crushed. But because of this, and I said this all throughout conference, be still, be in the moment, be where your feet are, right? I think sports and emotion go hand in hand. You can't control the wave, but you can learn not to ride the high too high and not to ride the low too low, and to be still and be in the moment with everything you do. The kids even laughed at that, right? I like to relentlessly say things to the point where now they either create memes, because that's what this generation does. They either create memes or stickers of it, which is good because at some point we're going to get comprehension. That means you got to spend some time in your off time making a meme of it. Great. At least you're learning something. May not be exactly what I wanted initially, but we get the end product. So I think when it comes to that, and with all my young men, Dan, this might be interesting. I try and lean towards stoicism, right? I think Meditations by Marcus Aurelius is one of the greatest literary works of all time. And I dumb it down for our young men of the team. And I do the same for our women. It's not that I don't do it with our women, I just do it in a different approach. But with our young men, I really teach them, hey, you have to be not emotionless, but stoic. Going back to that saying, you have to be relentless in your process without being emotionally attached to the results. Obviously, it was heartbreaking for our seniors to lose that the conference championship the way we did it, but it happened. Accept it, be relentless in your process, right? Because if everything you do is emotionally attached to results, then you're going to be a slave to your emotions and the highs and the lows. So,
You mentioning the stoicism for the males and a similar version for the females. There's a lot of debate on how we coach male and female athletes, and some are saying we should coach them exactly the same, and some are saying we should coach them drastically different. How is your own coaching framework and philosophy adapted to coach both male and female athletes? And obviously, we've continued the relentless theme throughout this episode. Does being relentless look different for the male athletes than the female athletes and vice versa? Or is it ultimately the same regardless of who we're referring to?
I think you can go both ways with this. To be relentless, it's going to look different for everybody, regardless of gender, regardless of sex, right? In my opinion, my men that listen to this may not like this, but I think our women's team was a little bit tougher than our men this year. And I told them that as much, right? We had a training trip at altitude. We did a 2-week altitude training camp in Arizona. Our women were tougher than our men, right? So I think it really comes down to the individual athlete, kind of your situation and how you want to address it. How I handle it here, I base it off of personalities. One of my greatest strengths as a coach, I believed in, is my ability to connect. Coaching is connection, being able to understand this athlete, meet them where they're at, right? Whether it's through any of the principles that we learned as coaches, right? From the volume and load that you're giving them, then your microcycles to, okay, hey, they just went through a breakup, you know, or hey, they're more introverted versus extroverted. And it's on you as a coach or working with young people to develop those skills over time, being relentless in your relationships that you have with your athletes. Just really understand who you're talking to, right? I've had some females in my program that would have literally swam circles around most of the men, and vice versa. I've had men here that were tough as nails that I could talk to as men and probably coach them in a way that's completely different than a woman. At the end of the day, in my opinion, it comes down to the individual and you as the coach or as that person, that position of authority, understanding who you're working with, right? Because coaching is connection. Another one of my sayings here that I'll say, one of my all-time personal favorites is people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And again, that's yet another cornerstone of my philosophy. You can be the most knowledgeable coach on the planet. If you can't connect to your athlete, it does not matter.
And I think that's a part of that softer skill element,
Sure.
if you wanna call it that, that I feel like can, again, make or break the success of an athletics program, because if your athletes cannot come to you with issues, with problems, with needs, right? You are there to help guide them on their journey here,
Right.
right? And I think there's this unique presentation of athlete too, as you were kind of alluding to. It's not just gender or experience and so on that way. There are some that are going to come in and they're just going to be absolute dogs, right? There's different archetypes of athletes, or we talk about this bucketing of athletes that everyone wants to do, or profiling of athletes, and some of it I think is good, but sometimes it's like, did we really need to spend 3 hours of assessment to do this, or could we have just had a 10-minute conversation over a coffee and literally understood maybe 80 to 90% of this. I think ultimately you need to be able to distinguish the athlete and their unique personality and have some kind of way of grouping them together, but you don't necessarily need the most fancy, complicated sports science setup to make that happen. I think a lot of the times, as you were talking, it just goes back to simple conversations and getting to know people.
Amen. And I think, we kind of drown out. There is a very much a need for sports science and data driven practices. I'm 100% component of that. And one of the biggest things that I think you and I may have seen at NSCA conferences is there's this divide between the academia side and the practical side. Great. You give me a case study for 12 weeks on plyometric training. And then you got the strength coach is saying, hey, just give me the program. What are some recommendations? What are the sets of reps ranges, bar speed, things of that nature? So it's simplifying it down, being efficient, right? While also keeping it simple. Remember, relentless, simple concept. And then you, as the coach, can take that, break it down, and then apply it to whatever your specific program needs are, with whatever population that you're with Gen Pop, geriatrics, kids, collegiate, club. It doesn't matter. These concepts can be applied anywhere. Keep it simple, connect with those that you coach, and you're going to be successful. I'm a firm believer in that.
Looking back retrospectively, this year, the theme was relentless. What were the themes in past seasons for you that way? And how did we come to this point of being relentless? Where were we in the past that ultimately led up to being relentless now?
That's a great question, and it's beautiful because I kind of, as a head coach, when you sit in this chair, you need to have a big picture. So I actually planned out a 4-year cycle, right? A quad is what is referred to in Olympics, and I started this program in 2021, and this is now 2026. We just finished our 5th full season, and in year one, it was all about extreme ownership, right? We are a brand new program. We had nothing. Everything is your fault, even when it's not. There's going to be things that are going to slip through the cracks, and we're going to have to figure it out together, right? There's no point in pointing fingers. We kind of mentioned it earlier on in the talk, right? Don't point fingers at people, address the problem and work it, even when it's not your fault. That's the most important thing. Everything is your fault, even when it's not. That was year one. Year two, Axios. Are we now worthy of this opportunity? Are we worthy of building this collegiate swimming and diving program together, right? And then I kind of look into year three, Adelante, one of our best years. We had a lot of Spanish speakers. We had 34 countries in the team in this season alone. So we have a very diverse international community. So I said, you know what? Adelante, let's keep moving forward. It's a Spanish phrase for move forward together, right? Last year was all about excellence, demanding excellence in everything that we did, which kind of led me to finishing off this chapter or this first block of our program's history with you must be relentless, right? And then now this next building block for next year is going to be an African philosophy known as Ubuntu. I don't know if you ever heard of it before, but it's I am because we are. And you mentioned that jar, right? We have the rocks, the pebbles, the sand, right? The sand happens because of what the rocks and the pebbles are, right? And going back to your lessons don't just come from coaches or athletes, it comes from everybody. Building that culture of I am a high performer because we are a high performing organization, right? And understanding what a high performing organization does and then living it, right? So Ubuntu, it's a great phrase. I'm excited for it for year 6. We'll see how we do. We have a lot of great young people here, and it's really just going to be about us building that community, building that environment, that culture. Every coach wants that, but living it every single day by being relentless, demanding excellence, always moving forward, knowing that we're worthy and everything's our fault, even when it's not.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that concept. I'd love to just kind of hear your thoughts, especially if there's any coaches listening. If they hear that and they think, oh my gosh, 4-year plan, like there is a lot of prep that went into this. There's a lot of time spent thinking, a lot of effort and energy put into getting to this point, right? It's kind of the iceberg analogy, right? Everyone sees the tip, no one sees
Correct.
what it took to get here that way. What advice or process do you maybe recommend to coaches who are saying, "Hey, you know what? I wanna take my team to this point where we're celebrating a championship. I gotta start now." What does that kind of building process look like? Where the last 4 years came from for you?
If I could just summarize this, not to be cliche, but you must be relentless. You have to And again, just going back to that word that we've said a million times, keep it simple, right? You can have this great quadrennial, you can have your annual periodization plan, whatever it is, right? But you need to identify first your vision, right? What do you want this to become? Right? When somebody walks into this space, what should they see? What should they already assume before you even have to say anything? Right? Culture for me is unspoken. For us, it's very simple because I've simplified it. I've had this vision and then I build every year towards that vision. Right? Just like athletes do with their goals, right? You have a plan, you build towards the plan. Keep it simple, have a vision, right? And if a 5-year-old doesn't understand your plan, Dan, neither do you. All right. And I think sometimes in this industry, we kind of get so caught up in, okay, hey, we could talk about all of the complexities, the biomechanics. We could talk about, optimizing movement patterns, working in isometrics here or there. There's always going to be places you can optimize in any single program on the planet. But before you get to that, do you have a simple vision that your athletes, that your population can buy into and believe? Because as we said early on in this conversation, it doesn't matter with the programming. I'll be honest with you. I've seen people perform that it did 50% of what was prescribed. And because they believed in the training when they could do it, they performed better than the guy that didn't miss a single day in 10 years. Maybe not that long, but you get my meaning, right? It's simple vision, building towards it, keeping it simple, right? And having that belief. If you have that belief, everybody in this team now knows our mission is build better humans. Every single recruit that comes in that we recruit knows that's what we do here. They know that I have a singular word that I focus on every single season, and that singular word is what we build everything on with that training plan, right? We took a huge jump in training volume and intensity this year, which is one of the other things that I wanted to frame Relentless on. We took a huge step in our training process. We did sets this year we've never done before. And a lot of the athletes in our end of year feedback told us, Coach, I didn't think I would be able to complete half the practices this year. But because I was relentless, I did it because I believed. So that's my advice. Keep it simple, have a simple vision, buy a cult or build a culture of belief, and you're going to be successful. You're going to be successful.
I love that. I love that, Caesar. That was incredible. I realize we can probably talk about this all day long because there's a lot that goes into being a relentless athlete, being a relentless coach, being a relentless person, and helping other people get to that point of relentlessness that way. Is there anything we missed as we were chatting today or anything else you wanted to cover in our discussion so far?
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate your time taking it, talking to me about being relentless. And obviously, if anybody has any questions or comments or they want to reach out, obviously, I have my contact information there, and you can share my email or wherever it is. I'm easy to find.
What's the
Website.
Instagram for people listening?
Yeah, Instagram is going to be Coach Caesar, right? So it's
Perfect.
at Coach
Simple.
Caesar. Very simple. Yep.
I like that. I like that. Last question. Obviously, we've discussed relentlessness at length, and that is the culture, the identity of your program, and so on that way. Have you ever had an instance where someone comes in and says, I want to be here, I want to swim here, but I don't want to be relentless? Or, I like to say it takes all kinds. And there are those people out there that are dedicated, that are driven, that will do anything that it takes. But there's also people out there that don't wanna do the work, and they just wanna cruise control through, and ultimately, it's their choice. Have you had that? And if so, how has it gone from either maybe suggesting they rethink their ways or maybe, "You know what? I can't change this person."
For those types of people that don't buy in or kind of question, I think kind of meet them where they're at first and foremost. Who is this person to you? What is your relationship to them? I had a situation this year where a young man transferred into our programs, didn't understand half of what we were doing. By the end of it, he's like, Coach, thank God you saved my life. Right. And I think it goes back to coaching and connection. And really just asking yourself, and by yourself, I mean the athlete, I would frame it to them. So, okay, hey, so you don't agree with this buy-in, you don't agree with what we're selling here, what we're peddling, right? Okay, so then what's your vision, right? What do you want, right? What are your values, and how can we work that into our culture? Because if you're a feedback-driven coach and you don't just shut it down and say, hey, well, maybe this isn't the program for you. Maybe that's the situation, and you run with it, and let bygones be bygones. But in this situation here, it's connect with that person, see where they're at, try and meet them in the middle. If they're willing to kind of give you some feedback on why they may not believe in everything that you're trying to build with your culture, try and meet them halfway, great. But if the ball really is in their court, kind of explain why they're not believing in that, and how you as the coach can kind of meet them in the middle or meet them a little bit further than halfway. Because you and I both know, Dan, at times we're going to have to go a little bit further than halfway for our athletes. So,
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. It's one of those things, if you come from a faith-based background, there's this concept of being equally yoked. And I think that that idea applies in a lot of different things, and sport can be one of them. It's like, hey, look, if I expect the athlete to put in the time and effort and energy, I, as a coach, also have to put in a similar amount of time, effort, and energy, and we're going to walk through this together. It's not so much just one person doing it all. It's, hey, I'm right in there with you.
amen. And we are a private Catholic institution, Dan. So, we actually do Bible studies every week. I'm very grateful we're able to do things like that. So we could talk about that at a later date. So, of
Absolutely. Caesar, this was incredible. Thank you so much for your time and your insights, man. Appreciate you.
course, thank you for having me, Dan.